let's switch it up, Ryan. Let's talk a bit about the similar. I know you do have a finance background. You're a data guy. You have a finance background too, and we had a great time chatting the other night. So I was interested in your thoughts around the similarities between the sports card market and the stock market. And when we were talking about that, the thread of discussion that interested me the most were your thoughts on the market cap of a card and whether or not it makes sense in sports cards. So why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that the way that I think is going to be productive over the long. So I think market caps are a great concept. I think that the hobby is still sort of learning where the fit is. And I think that market caps as it relates to cards is a little bit narrow and probably doesn't service the hobby the way that I think people want it to. I think that to the degree that there's market caps around players, I think that's going to be really important. And I think that some of these tools are set up to start to provide that, because I don't think that I think all these sets and all the variation year by year and all the different parallels that are introduced make it really hard. It's not an apples to apples conversation from year to year. It's hard to even compare set to set at this stage. And so to the degree when you're entering the market, when I come in, I'm like, hey, what does the market for Ja Morant look like? And I want to understand where it looks like relative to other players. And so I want to know how many people are interested in what's the demand for Ja Morant cards? What is his market cap relative to Zion? And when I look at that, I want to say, okay, are Ja's cards undervalued? Are they overvalued? And I think that something like Card Ladder is doing some interesting stuff there with their player indexes. I think that starts that conversation. Their database has to expand massively to sort of like capture market cap though in that way. And I think that's a big part of why PSA was excited about what they're doing. But I definitely think that market cap will play a role, but I'm excited for it to move to a little bit more of the macro side of things around like players themselves. I think, again, it's like if you look at cards, it's like trying to compare, Disney's theme parks to Apple's AirPods. Both super interesting. People like Disney a lot. People like Apple a lot, but you can't really compare the two. They're very different lines of businesses, very different contexts, and I think you see a lot of that with cards. I don't know if that's like the perfect metaphor, but it's at least a starting point for me when I think about how limiting market cap through the lens of cards is today and where it might be able to expand to in the future.
Okay, interesting. I want to keep going on that topic for a moment. You mentioned Card Ladder. I noticed today that Card Ladder passed the 20,000 cards in their database milestone today. So if anyone from Card Ladder is watching or listening, congratulations to you guys on that milestone. But yeah, their acquisition by collectors is definitely going to help them, really accelerate the rate at which they add cards to the database. So I think from 0 to 20,000. If that took a year and a half, 20,000 to 100,000 and pass should be a lot quicker. So I'm sure it will be. Okay. I see Bless and Break says you were hoping I would have done a live review of the Golden Auction tonight, but definitely appreciate tonight's guest. Glad to have you. Bless and Breaks. Eric says that they asked me to send the labels back for proof. Talking about breaking out the BGS. That makes a lot of sense for sure. So back to market cap for a sec though. So to me, when I think about the market cap, I like to think that it is comparable and there is some benefit to it when you're talking, especially about commodity cards. To me, it doesn't make as much sense on a super limited card or super high-end card, but it does make sense to me if I'm going to compare the Prism silver of Luka to Giannis to whomever else, to Ja, to Trey, all these different guys. Tyler Hero, or if you're going to compare the young guns of Sidney Crosby to Alex Ovechkin and Connor McDavid, to me, that is a metric that is interesting, but the whole picture isn't in the market cap. You still need to know how many cards and what's the price per card, what's the overall market cap, because that's the total. I'm going to say this and then qualify. That's the total money invested at that time. Now we know that it's not the money invested because there was unrealized losses and gains depending on where you got in, but that's the value at that point in time based on that most recent comp or the average of the few most recent comps of all the cards that exist. So is that not valuable somewhat to the hobby to say, okay, you know what, if you take two players A and B, and player A, the card is worth $1,000 and there's been 1,000 cards graded, and player B, the card's worth $2,000 and there's been 500 cards graded. They both have the same market cap. One's worth a lot more, maybe because the print run is lower, or maybe that's why. And the other one's worth what he is. So maybe there's some value in going for the cheaper guy right now, because you think, well, this other guy, he's hot right now, his pop is going to catch up to the cheaper guy. So maybe there's value there for market in terms of market cap. So I can see it being valuable and of use if you are looking at all the information. Market cap itself means nothing unless you know the share price. It's like at the same rate, share price means nothing unless you know the market cap. You need both of those pieces of information to make an informed decision, or at least a semi-informed decision. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think that I'm not dismissing market cap as it exists today. I'm just saying it's an early advancement on where I think the hobby can go. But I think it's an advancement over what you see in stocks when people are new coming in and investing in jumping into Robinhood. They look at prices and they say, oh, this is expensive. Something is priced at $500 and that's expensive relative to something at $20. And the challenge you have is you need to know the shares outstanding to actually know how much that company is valued at, to actually understand the market cap for a stock. And I think that is relevant within this context of, we don't want people just talking about prices of cards because it's limiting, and you need to know the population of the cards, which essentially are the equivalent to shares here. I do think it is specific to the examples you mentioned. I think they're very relevant. So when you're staying narrowly within like Prism Base or Prism Silvers, I think they're really relevant. I think it's when you're trying to compare, things that are not necessarily that closely related, and you're trying to compare a exquisite to national treasures. I think it gets a lot harder. Granted, there's serial numbers in play, and I think that helps to sort of even things out or level the playing field a little bit. But I think it's great for what you described there, and I think it's more challenging when you start to go across sets and stuff like that. So I think when you're narrowly looking at market cap, I think it's very relevant. I think as you start to expand beyond that, it gets tricky.
Yeah, more challenging across sets, more challenging across eras, and even challenging across sports overall. All that said, I remember, we all remember probably just over a year ago, it seemed to me, modern had really gone crazy, the high-end modern, and all of a sudden the vintage tended to have caught up. And I think if you were to look at the market caps back then of, say, the LeBron James National Treasures versus Bill Russell, 57 Topps rookie, you'd say, well, hey, there's way more money invested in LeBron than Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain for that matter, So, and then this might not be a great example, but you get the point. And then all of a sudden, those vintage cards really started to catch up in value, on a comparable rate. Like even if you compare, say, the Mike Trout that sold, I think Ken Golden sold the Mike Trout in 2020 for $3.6 million or something like that. And that was more than a Mickey Mantle had sold for, or a Honus Wagner had sold for up until that point. And then all of a sudden the Mickey Mantles and the Honus Wagner started to sell for that much. They kind of caught up again. I wonder how much of that was the market responding to market cap, but maybe not knowing they were responding to it, specifically to the market cap of a specific card. But yet the market cap, the result of that was that they kind of caught up. The market cap of vintage caught up somewhat to the market cap of modern. Now, I say this without any data to back it up. I'm just going by gut, so I could be completely wrong. But I think that's part of the process. I think a lot of times we as collectors, we do go by our gut and feel, what's something worth? Well, you can check comps, you can check market caps and all this stuff compared to other players. But at the end of the day, you're going to go with what you think makes sense. And people thought that vintage was undervalued compared to modern, and vintage caught up quite a bit back then. So I wonder how much that ties in, if at all, to market cap. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it does. I just think that it's a little bit more of that exercise that I was mentioning before. But I think people will look at it in aggregate and sort of say, wait, this seems, not calibrated the way it should be, in the sense that, these modern cards, if you collectively look at the pool that's invested there, it's, equal to this much. And, if we look at vintage, it's way undervalued relative to that. And we'll see that sort of rise accordingly. And so I think it matters. I think when you roll it up, it makes a ton of sense. And I think market cap as a concept makes sense. I just like to sort of caution people on looking at it at the card level.